Everyone, welcome to the fourth version, finally, of T4. As always, my name is Tim Myers. With us, we have the famous Mr. Tim Hudson. Tim, it's been a while, buddy. How you been?
I've been well, Tim. Had a couple of strange personal health things in August and September, and then real work kind of prevented me from getting all the dedicated time to be able to come up with the content, craft the things for this, for what we're doing here. I'm good now. Feel great. Glad to be back. Looking forward to today's session.
Yeah, definitely. Me too. I mean, man, Veeam has been such a busy place, right? The recent Casted announcement, we're right in the midst of Veeam Live. We've been, working really heavily on the preparation for V11, and all of the end of quarter, right, end of year activities have just really been a lot. So super excited to talk about today. We've talked about Office 365 in the past. I think we should switch gears a little bit today. I mean, I'd really like to pick a topic that I think our service providers are going to be real keen on, and that's going to be vCloud Director. So what do you say we spend a little bit of time today, and let's just kind of frame up what has been some of the traditional challenges that our service providers have had to deal with maintaining a VCD infrastructure and backing up tenant data. And then maybe we can tease a little bit the new VCD to VCD replication feature that's coming in V11. And, who knows, Tim, you've got a pretty rocking lab, buddy. I bet that you've got that feature already set up. And maybe just to kind of put you on the spot, we could jump into your lab and give the folks a little bit of a tour. What do you say?
Yeah, I'd love that, Tim. A lot of folks know that I've got quite a bit of VCD experience, and I'd love to talk, kind of make sure that everyone understands what we can do today from a backup standpoint, and then let's float into what we're going to be able to do tomorrow from a replication standpoint and try to complete that picture.
Yeah, so let's use a little bit of technology, shall we? Let's do some digital whiteboarding, and maybe that'll do a really good job of showing the story, if you will, that we're going to attempt to tell. Oh, look at you, man! You're already ready to go.
Well, I found this Surface Pen that I had lost for a few months, Tim. This is honestly why I haven't been doing this for a little while. So I found my pen, and you probably can't see it with the weird digital background, but I found it. I'm ready to go.
Awesome. Awesome. So our typical service provider environment is going to be a handful of components, right? We know that we're going to have at least one VCD cell. We're going to have a vCenter managing some vSphere infrastructure, and we're going to have a number of Veeam components there, right? So why don't you go ahead and draw that out for me there in side A, and let's just show a good logical representation of what you see your service providers typically do.
Yep. Well, we know, Tim, that our VCD implementation is really one or more cells that live at a particular site. Okay, so we're calling this site A. Let's assume we have configured one or more vCloud Director cells according to their documented install process in terms of load balancing and certificates and all that. So let's assume that we've deployed our VCD cell. Let's assume that we've connected this to a vCenter and NSX manager. So what we've built in that is a provider virtual data center construct. And of course, there's going to be some hosts. And of course, those hosts are going to run our tenant workloads, right?
Yep.
So far, so good?
So far, so good.
All right, so let's talk about what we can do today, okay?
Get you with the Veeam green.
Yes, you like that?
I do, yeah, I do.
Okay, so this in the Veeam green, we're going to start with a VBR. Okay, this is our just backup and replication server. And what we can do today is we can add our VCD site to that backup and replication server. It will automatically discover all of our provider virtual data centers, which gives us the vCenter address. Once we provide credentials, we can also now communicate with those hosts for the purpose of creating backups. So I've added my backup infrastructure as my VCD site, inclusive of my vCenter and hosts. Let's also add a repository. And Tim, today I can make a VCD backup job. I can target these VMs and back them up to this repository. We get a little bit more though. Can you remind me of what those VCD things are that are kind of those important constructs around these virtual machines? Because it's not just the VM data that we want to be able to back up, right?
Oh yeah, Tim, absolutely. You're talking about the VApp construct.
Yeah, what's in there? What does that do for us?
So the VApp construct has a number of different properties that we won't really see if we look at kind of the vCenter layer, right? We'll see any of the external networks that have been applied, any of the organizational networks. We'll see any of the internal VApp networks that have been created. Like there's a lot of institution that we can do to the idea of a VApp and the workloads in that VApp that give us the ability to really kind of manipulate and configure that environment to meet the needs of a cloud hosted multi-tenant infrastructure.
Yeah, so in there we're going to have to meet those needs, to be able to run this VApp and these VMs inside this VApp. We're going to have some networking construct. We're going to have a startup and shutdown order. Yeah.
Absolutely. We'll have some firewall rules and some NATing rules.
Okay, I'll cover that. We'll count that in the networking piece there. Okay, so today, this VApp construct made up of those VMs inside that provider VDC, we can back them up. We can restore them as virtual machines. We can restore them as this VApp construct. All right, can I do a backup copy job and take that off site?
Yes, I can.
All right, now I've got two sites. Okay, Tim, if I add in a second site, I'm worried here. Am I going to lose a bunch of Veeam capabilities, because I've got a second site and I want to do this backup copy job? Am I expecting a problem here or some set of limitations?
I think that what we have historically seen is that as our service providers have built their business and they've wanted to come up with different sets of infrastructure that is redundant, highly available, and within close proximity to their customers, that it becomes natural that they want to take a set of capabilities and be able to replicate those capabilities to a secondary site. Not all products are multi-site aware. And so from the perspective of Veeam, we've traditionally handled them as kind of like in addition to. So I could certainly have another VCD instance and another set of infrastructure at that secondary site. I can have another set of Veeam infrastructure sitting there at that secondary site. But I think, Tim, the one piece that we've seen a lot of our service providers ask for and request has been, why can't I do some level of replication from site A to site B, as opposed to just being able to do a backup copy job from site A to site B? And can I do that replication and still be able to preserve all of those VApp properties that we just spoke about?
Yeah, Tim, that is something I get asked about all the time. It honestly has to do, I believe, with folks' desire to reduce the number of partners and vendors they work with, but still be able to offer a robust set of services. And I don't think I'm beating around the bush here. There's competitors that do these types of things. So, boy, isn't there a great opportunity for us to improve what we can do in the backup and replication portfolio? So let's talk about what's coming. Let's talk about this next level type of capability here. I'm gonna, well, while you're doing that, I'm gonna remove our backup items here, and then let's talk about replication.
Yeah, and just to kind of finish the thought on this, Tim, right? So again, back to the way service providers do it today, pre V11, they have to do a backup copy job. And so they have that backup copy job. The backup sits now at the secondary location. What's the process if I need to be able to restore those workloads at that secondary location? Like, just to kind of finish the story off, what's the additional level of effort there required to get to an end state of the VMs are now sitting on this secondary side running and available for use?
Two options there, depending on exactly, you know, the nitty gritty scenario, but they're both pretty straightforward. You know, one is that because we did a VCD native backup, this ability to restore natively back into VCD, which is inclusive of the constructs that we got from the metadata, the startup shutdown order, all that VApp information. Okay, so it's native restoration. But maybe something didn't go right. Maybe all you had was virtual machine data. So secondarily, it always exists as an option to restore virtual machine data and then import into vCloud Director.
Right. Recreating the VApp, recreating all of the VApp properties, if you will.
Yep.
Importing those virtual machines, attaching those virtual machines to the networks defined inside of the tenant space. So there's a good amount of manual effort. Could it be done? Sure, it could absolutely be done, and a lot of people do it that way today. But it's not really seamless, right? It's not a native capability per se.
Correct.
Okay. All right. Very good. So if we transition now into what do we expect and what do we see coming from a feature perspective in V11, it's no secret. I mean, it's pretty much public news at this point, right? That one of those key service provider features is going to be this VCD to VCD replication. And so when we talk about the VCD to VCD replication, the multi-site home's very important. And as you've taken those pieces away, Tim, right? I see you removed the repository, you took off the backup copy job example there. What's changed? Like, what would we expect to see now from a logical diagram perspective of the capabilities that we'll soon be demonstrating?
Yeah, let's see if I can pick a fun color scheme here. I'm grateful to Microsoft for their options. If we're talking about replication, we know we don't have repositories for the purpose of storing this real live replica data, the VMDK data. Instead, what we do, instead of having repositories to store that, what we do from this VBR, I'll look at that.
Oh, that's interesting.
We're going to have one or more proxies. These are the same proxies we utilize to perform the backup operations. We'll leverage these colorful proxies to query the VM data just like we do for backups, but instead of storing that in a repository locally, we're going to copy that virtual machine data, full first, incremental replicas beyond that, to a set of proxies at the target site. And this is going to, instead of leading us down that recovery path of restore from backup, take us into a recovery path of powering on the standby virtual machines ready and waiting, no restore from backup. So it is this process driven by a VBR at one site, leveraging proxies there to pull the virtual machine data, transmit that probably over a VPN or some other type of direct link, just say layer 2, layer 3 connectivity, to proxies at site B, and then finally down into the virtual machine and VMDK um, construct at this second site.
So this is really predicated on technology that's been built into the Veeam products for quite some time, right? If we think about what are we really saying, what we're saying is that the same replication technology that has existed from vSphere to vSphere for years is now being elevated and made available to VCD to VCD, right? We're taking the replication technology and we're just making it smarter and more aware and capable of being able to understand those VApps and the VApp properties, right? And all of the uniqueness, if you will, that comes with a vCloud Director environment. Is that fair,
Yeah,
Tim?
it is. And so I want to draw this out for you, Tim. If any VApp is made up of one or more very colorful virtual machines, I can't wait for my 8-year-old to watch this with me in the future, Tim. I'm really excited about this. So this VApp is made up of one or more VMs. This whole thing, this is what we are moving from source to destination. It's not just individual VMs. It's the VMs plus the whole data from, or all the metadata from this VApp construct. And we can take this in that VCD context from one organization in org VDC over to any other organization in org VDC. And it's this VApp container that's our portable object.
So Tim, I could see a couple different use cases for this, right? I mean, really, this could be intersite or it could be site to site. I mean, the old days of SRM come to mind, and people used to look at SRM as a data recovery product, right? Disaster recovery product. And then we found, when I was at VMware, that many people found out that it was a VM transport mechanism, that they could also use SRM to maybe migrate from rack to rack or data center to data center, or what have you. If I understand you correctly, and let's say that I have two provider VDCs and my provider VDCs are in the same site, but maybe two different clusters, two different storage frames, two different sets of infrastructure. There's nothing precluding me from saying, here's my source cluster A, here's my source cluster B, same site, and also being able to use this interdata center.
Correct, Tim. I mean, while the most common use case in the field may be what we described already in terms of site A to site B, we are absolutely going to promote, support, and inform folks that there's so many other use cases like what you've described. Perhaps it's just changing storage. Perhaps it's migrating from one version of vCloud Director to another. There are plenty of reasons why folks upgrade as a next finish, and plenty of reasons why folks might be starting net new with a new vCenter, a new VCD implementation, because maybe they're switching to appliance mode, for example, or changing NSX types. And so the possibility to just run this migration from platform to platform, I don't care if it's multiple sites. We're just talking about moving the data to make it go from implementation to implementation, and that's pretty powerful. I see there's flexibility intersite. I see there's flexibility as migration from version to version, and like most Veeam things, it's just going to work. So I'm really looking forward to, of course, the traditional use case, just as a disaster recovery mechanism, and as well as those kind of auxiliary use cases.
Very cool. Okay, so for the interest of time, right? I think we've framed this up pretty well. If we kind of moved on to maybe the next piece that people would want to know, I'm installing VBR version 11 beta 1, and I'm putting that in my primary location, and it has all those pieces that you talked about earlier. And I'm also going to do that in my secondary site now. Could you just maybe take a second and talk through what are the requirements that someone might need to know in order to get this to work? assuming that they're setting it up and configuring it for the first time?
Yeah, luckily the VCD requirements are pretty straightforward. It's essentially what we've had in the past in terms of supported versions. So, I mean, I'm going to say I wouldn't suggest anyone pre 9.5. Hopefully, there's not too many folks out there trying to leverage this. You want to still be on a somewhat modern version of VCD, but the requirements are quite straightforward. So let's just walk through what I have set up, and that will help illustrate what those requirements are. So I am running beta 1 of our V11 code. And what I have configured are 2 VCD sites. Okay? One in my lab and one connected across a point-to-point VPN to my peers' VCD implementation. Now, my peers' VCD implementation is added here as a public URL. But when I go look at my vSphere information, I am, of course, able to see at least 2 vCenter servers. I'm even doing a third to play around with CDP, Tim. But I've got my main lab vCenter as well as my peer, Chris Arsenault's vCenter. And of course, if I were to go dive further in, I could see all of their hosts. I have access and permissions to the hosts, data stores, and virtual machines across both sides of my VPN.
Okay.
All right. So that's my kind of managed server infrastructure. I am leveraging this system itself as a Veeam proxy. Okay. This is available to my infrastructure today. And what I have done is I have simply built 2 jobs to describe the use cases we've gone over today. I create a new replica job. I have to source a VApp. I am not sourcing VMs. I am sourcing a VApp, but we don't make you pick every VApp individually, right? You could have picked an entire organization here at this level or an entire org VDC. Okay, so you can pick the roll-up items if you want, but really what Veeam is going to be looking at are the VApp constructs.
So really I have 3 choices here, right? I could pick the org, I could pick the org VDC, or I could pick an individual VApp.
Correct.
Okay.
And then of course you have your normal exclusion options and so on and so forth. For destination, this is the rubber meeting the road, okay? I have already built this job. I cannot change my destination. If I wanted to, I'd be picking a new job, right? No real point in being able to change that destination, quite honestly. So what I've done here is I have picked my source VApp from Chris's lab, and I have picked my destination org VDC and pick my destination storage policy. I mean, this perfectly makes sense to me because since we're transporting that VApp level, the destination must be an org VDC. And if I pick my org VDC, of course, I've already picked my organization. So it's all built in there to easily separate these workloads and keep a clear picture of your source and destination there. Of course, I'm able to pick my storage policy, define it at the second site. Individually, I can have different replicas, go to different data stores. And honestly, Tim, the rest of the job options on the left
look like
they're all standard. They're all the same. There's really not much to say about it.
So requirements. Part of the installation, maybe you could talk just for a quick second around the piece of software that we actually install when we're doing this.
Yeah, so VBR and the proxies are all that's required for VCD to VCD replication. The only administrative setting on your vCloud Director servers that you should be configuring is disabling what's called VM discovery,
Oh
which
yeah,
is the
that's enabled by default.
that's enabled by default. And what VM discovery does is whenever you put a machine over into a target virtual data center and you build a VM and vCenter in that resource pool or in that VM folder, VCD is going to automatically pick that up and call it a unique VM. And so there is a standard recommendation from Veeam when you're using Cloud Connect replication for VCD, or I expect this VCD to VCD replication. We want to disable that VM auto discovery. So Veeam doesn't fight against VCD and adding the same machine over and over as they layer this discovery. So it's really the only outside of Veeam requirement here. Perhaps what you may be referring to or wanting to make sure our audience understands, Tim, is that this is not CDP replication. I am not installing custom VIBs on these hosts for this purpose today. Who knows what
Glad you picked up on that. That was a little trick question there. Yeah, I mean, for the purposes of time, right? I think we're probably going to have to kind of wrap this up fairly soon. But here's my takeaway. Number one, our service providers should be really excited about VCD to VCD replication. It's not a new technology; it's a new capability, right? It builds on the replication technology that's been built into Veeam for several years. We've had VCD aware capabilities for quite some time. It's really kind of the marriage of those two together, right? So as we've heard the feedback that says we'd love to be able to apply that replication technology at the VCD layer, we're finally bringing that to market, right? Everything is pretty much similar to what you've seen previously. The creation of the job is pretty much the same. The job settings are pretty much the same. The type of technology, pretty much the same, right? We really need people to test this as we're in the midst of our V11 beta period right now. I mean, part of our job is to kind of be translators. We want to look at the new capabilities that are coming in the product, understanding the conversations and the requirements that we have from you on a regular basis, and really kind of applying those two together, right? What are you asking us for, and what is coming? And how do we demonstrate that value back to you so that you recognize what you need to kind of go spend your time on? So I think Tim, it's our job to kind of be the informers, right? The evangelizers, if you will, of what this new technology is, as it kind of directly relates to a problem, right? Or a capability that our service providers have been asking for. But I think just as importantly, our ask back to you is to please test this, right? I mean, Tim has a great lab, and by the way, great job for kind of showing that off today. How often do you test that feature, Tim? How many different scenarios and use cases and automation and API integration and storage infrastructures and versions? I mean, that's a little outside of the scope of what you have time for, right? But the reality
and our
is,
QA is Tim, our QA is fantastic, but it's not exactly what our service providers are doing in production. There is almost no conceivable way to make our testing implementations exactly what our partners are doing in the field. And that's why we want to talk about it. That's why we want to, have this collaboration and do this testing.
Yeah, definitely. So I hope, in the grand scheme of things, you've kind of got an opportunity to see what's coming, right? Hope you're excited as we are about the VCD to VCD replication. Again, Tim, thanks so much for kind of drawing that out and giving us the picture and talking through kind of like what people do today and what they're trying to accomplish, and then what they'll be able to accomplish very soon with the capability in V11. I think that was great. And, again, to the audience, right? Please test. The beta is open. Contact your SEs or SAs. Ask to be part of the V11 beta. We'd love to have you participate. Love to get your feedback. Love for you to test this as much as you can before it GAs, right? So that any of those pesky bugs can be identified, they can be fixed, they can be, kind of moved out of the way. And we look forward to a successful V11 launch.
Thanks, Tim.